Video's going. Hey everyone, so welcome to working with API data and fetch and map and applicative programming and I don't know, you guys tell me. So I'm pulling up a whiteboard and I would love to hear from you. What would be helpful for you on this?
In my production website, which I've already submitted, and this was just an extra step I was going to do,
Sure.
but I couldn't get it to work. So I would like to figure it out. It was a trivia page.
Okay.
And the API, I've got the trivia questions to return in an array, the trivia correct answers to return in an array, and the incorrect answers to return in an array. And I'm trying to figure out how to pull each question separately.
Okay.
And then also append the answers to them in a random order.
So is the issue that you have all of the questions and all of the answers, but they're not together?
Well, all of the questions aren't separated. And I can't get the answers to randomly generate in
Gotcha.
their
Do you have an example of the data?
Yeah. Cool. Let me put it in the chat. It's he put that in the insomnia. You'll see the.
All right, let's pull up insomnia.
And I know it's got to be something to do with using for each or maybe even slicing the questions, but I just couldn't get it.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. Great API. So before I dig into this, let's talk about a couple things. So applicative programming, so this includes all of our methods like for each, map, reduce, filter, find, sort. Like almost everything that we need to do with data transformation can be done with these. As an alternative, now that we're talking about procedural programming, you can also do a lot of those kinds of things with for, including like for in, for of, while, push, pop, shift, unshift, splice. So these two things are opposite approaches for doing the same thing. So you pretty rarely need to use both of them at the same time. I'd put slice kind of in between. You're probably more likely to splice something in that than to slice it. That might be something you do inside of one of these. But for like most bread and butter data transformations, for example, wrangling this API data format into a shape that you want, chances are like these functions will get you there. Okay, so here's how I would think of this. If we take one of these, like let's say I copy this object here, And I'm going to put it in a text editor, and we'll look at how we might be able to wrangle this. Oops, no. And this is a good strategy for anything like this. We're like that. This is what I get back from the API. Our next step is, what should it look like? What is the thing that I want to use in my application? If this sounds an awful lot like, what are the inputs and what are the outputs? Because it's exactly what it is. What are the inputs to the transformation I need to do, and what should the output be? So, so Sharon, walk me through what you would like this to look like.
Oh, I would like a list of questions to generate, and under each question, all 4 answers with the correct one begin in the middle of the incorrect.
Gotcha. So you want something like each question has like options. Actually, I'm trying to think if I can come up with the like awesome academic term for this. Distractor. Because hey, it's almost like I write questions for a living. So you would want the distractors to be, I guess it's not all that different than what we have. So, all right, I'm going to think about this slightly differently. Well, let's think about this in terms of what the HTML would look like. So we want something that's like div prompt like that, and then we want, these are distractors. And then, all right, cool. I think this is probably what we're talking about. Sharon, does this look right? We want to turn the top thing into the bottom thing?
Yes, I was going to do it as a form, cool, but that's okay. This is good enough.
Well, let's put that in there as a form, and then each of these, let's see, do value is answer. And then each of these would be like radio buttons. So like input type equals radio. Value is Apollo 11. Right? Yeah. And then name is distractor. Oops. 10, 9, 13, and then Okay, I think... Oh, you know what? No, these need to have labels too. That's how that works. I was like, that doesn't look right. Where does the actual text supposed to go? It's supposed to go there. So that's 10. That's 9. That's 13. And then these are like 4. Option 4. Option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4. And then these over here should be option 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we did that as a form. Okay, then these values shouldn't have spaces in them. So what we really want is for that to be something like oh, let's do it this way. Oops. Value or correct, incorrect, incorrect, incorrect. Yeah. Cool. That feels about right to me. So the important thing that I want you to take away from what I just did, start here. What's the victory state look like? Because like, there's a bunch of different ways that we could do this. If this isn't what we want it to be, then we don't know where we're going. And so how would we know where to start? So this is a real start with the end in mind kind of idea. If you had this HTML hard-coded on a page, can you get it to do what you want? And so like I would start with that. Get that on a page and even write like the JavaScript logic. Can you get it so that when you submit this, it tells you whether or not you got something right or wrong or whatever else, without doing the API integration at all. Because then, once you have that working, all you need to do is keep it working while we're sourcing all that information from this object instead. Does that make sense? Questions about that?
Makes sense.
Excellent. Okay, so let's talk about how we might, let's say that this is right. This is what we want it to be. We've got the event handlers all figured out. Cool, we got a working quiz thing. So now we need to figure out how to get from here to here. So a bunch of different ways you could do that. I think one of the easiest might be to work backward. So what happens right before this gets made, or what's some part of this that we could make? And so in my mind, the first thing that would jump out to me is, can I make a function that will create one of these little like label input pairs? And so I might say something like create labeled input. And so what that would need to do is return something like that. And then we got to figure out, all right, well, what parts of this change? What would be different from one labeled input to another? And so we've got a couple things. One is like the option. So I'm going to call that response option. We might have like an is correct. That would go there. That's going to be the same on all of them. That's going to be the same on all of them. Which option it is. So maybe option number. All right, so if I had those three things, I could reasonably make this. So that would be something like response option, option number, option number. And then this one's kind of interesting because I want is correct to be true or false. I want this to be like the word correct. So how you would do that is you'd say something like, if it's correct, that should be the string correct. Otherwise, make it the string incorrect. So something like that, I think, would be a function that I could use to make all of these. So then, working backwards from that, well, that makes one of them. How do I make all of them? Well, all, that should like make your ears burn a little bit. All means arrays and iteration. So we might say, okay, what if I had like distractor data? We'll call it distractors. It's an array of objects, or maybe each of them has an option number and a response option and like an is correct thing. So option number 1, response option, Apollo 11, is correct, is true. So then if I do that for each of these, see, the other one was 10 and false. This one's going to be 3, 4. It was Apollo 10, Apollo 9, Apollo 13. Okay, so now I have this array of distractors. So could I use this array of distractors? Could I turn it into an array of labeled inputs? Well, turn it into, the ears should burn, map. So if I mapped over that and said, all right, for each distractor, I want to call create labeled input with distractor.option number, distractor.response option, and distractor.is correct, and return that. Okay, so that turns this array of objects into an array of these things. So now I've written the code that could generate all of that. Now, like each of those is like one of these strings. And so to make them all one string that I could do something like inner HTML with, I can join it at the end. So now this whole expression here that goes into distractors, I can make like a distractors UL. Like document.query selector, or no, I need to create it, maybe. Create element UL. Then I could say something like ul.innerHTML is distractors. And now I've created all of this. Okay, cool. What else does the form need? Well, it needs a p tag with the prompt. So if I made a p tag with that, I could set p tags text content to some prompt. So if I pull that out into a variable, like what do I call it? Okay, now I have code that will make all of this. And then I could take all of that. The last pieces I need are the form. Maybe the form is just hard-coded into the thing. And so what I'm really doing is taking the form and, I don't know, mounting it all inside of some div that's in here. And so this becomes the response options, something like that. I pull response options out, and then I mount everything that I just made inside of that. Questions so far? I still don't know how I'm going to get from this to all of the things that I just made. That's fine. What I did is I started at the end and started working backwards. How do I make this? How do I make all of this? How do I make all of this? Okay. So really, the only thing that I need at this point to make all of those things are the prompt and these distractors. So I've narrowed down the problem substantially. What I need is a way to turn this into something that has a prompt and something that has an array of distractors in it. That's a smaller, more wrap your head around it kind of problem. So let's figure out, how would I get, well, first of all, let's make the problem smaller again. What if I take these distractors and this prompt and I try to put them into one thing? So we're just going to call this question, which is an object that has a prompt. And has distractors in an array. Then I can copy all this out, put it there instead. And now that becomes question.prompt, and this becomes question.distractors.map. .map? No. Like that. So now the data is totally stripped out of all of this logic. If I have a question that's formatted like this, I can do all the rest of it from there. So now the next question is, how do I turn this into this? Well, first thing that I would do, this is really a map, like, because I'll have an array. Well, no, before I get there, it's really just a function. So we're going to call that function something like create question from API response. For API question. And so that's going to take in an API question, and it's going to return something that looks more like this. All right, so low-hanging fruit. The thing I need to return needs to look like that. The prompt, that seems like an easy enough place to start. So if I'm returning the prompt, where do I get the prompt from the API question? Well, it's API question dot question. Okay. What about these distractors? So if I'm trying to solve this problem, I'm going to write distractors, and I'm going to put an empty array here, and then I'm going to stare at it for a second. And go, all right, how could I get all of those distractors out of the API question? Well, what if, let's see, I could... Oh, I was going to say, like, this feels like a reduced kind of thing because I'm taking stuff from a couple different sources and trying to jam it into one thing. It's actually even easier than that. Check this out. I can put the correct answer in. So I could say API question.correct answer, and then spread the incorrect answers. So API question.incorrect answers. That's going to give me these strings. What it won't give me is, it won't give them in this format that I want. And it won't randomize them. Okay, so interesting. What I want to do then is probably map over this. Okay, I could do this. I could either just do a specific transformation, like call like API, create, I don't know, create distractor from whatever on both of these and turn this into like a map, create distractor from. That would be one way to do it, but like it feels like too much work. So I think what I would do instead is keep these as is, but I'm always going to put the correct answer in the first position. And then I'm going to map over those. And this is like a good use for the index. So if these are distractor, then I also have that index that I can pull there. And if it's the first index, the 0 index, I know it's the correct answer. Otherwise, I know it's the incorrect answer. So I could say index is 0. If that's true, then I want to return that, and then this is the actual distractor. I could probably derive that from the index, and then that's going to be true. If it's anything else, then it would be this. The option number stays the same. Response option stays the same. The only thing that changes is whether or not it's true or not. Okay, so now distractors is one array with all of the stuff in the correct format. The only problem is that they're not randomized. So at this point, I'm looking at this ball of code that I have here and going, God, that's all one statement, isn't it? That is really hard to follow. So before I start working on the randomizing thing, that's a great sign that I need to start extracting functions. That should be like your kind of instinct at that point. So first one that I see is like inside of this map. It like takes in a distractor and an index. So this is like create API, create distractor from API distractor. And it takes in a distractor, yeah, and an index. And then otherwise, I can just take that whole thing, tuck it in this function. And now all of this just got so much less bulky. And I can do this in place. Create distractor from API distractor. Okay, now I'm back to being able to look at this and figure out what the hell it's doing. Okay, so last problem is that I need to be able to randomize the order of those distractors. So like that's actually a kind of tricky thing to do within an array. There's not a great way to do it built into JavaScript. So Lodash has something though. Lodash is a collection of utility functions, one of which is shuffle. Creates an array of shuffled values, and that's the algorithm they use for it. So if we pass an array of anything, numbers, objects, strings, doesn't matter, into shuffle, we get those back in a random order. So if I wanted to use that, I could look at the Lodash CDN. I just need to make sure that one of these script tags is in the HTML document before this response gets loaded in. And what I will get out of that is underscore or Lodash shuffle. Pass that entire thing into it. Okay, sick. So I can create a question from an API question. If I have one of these, I can turn it into the format that I want. Okay, well what I get back from this API is like an array of those. So then this turns into fetch all of this and response.json. Let's go ahead and handle errors while we're looking at it. And then it's response.results that has our thing. Response.results is an array of these objects that I can map over. And the thing that I want to do for each of those is create question from API question. Okay, so I got that. So what comes back out of that? Create question from API question, does all of that, and ultimately is create. Oh, and then none of the rest of the stuff is in functions. So now I don't need this question thing anymore. I already have like this stuff here. So if I have the questions in the format that I want, which is what this map did, then I can for each over those questions. And for each question, I can do all this stuff. feel like I missed a closing brace or something. For each question, I make one of these. I put the prompt in it. I map over the distractors and the thing. I make all the stuff. Like that. This turns into, let's see, I think this stuff needs, oh, there it was. That was what I cut out. And this stuff ends up going there.
It makes so much more sense going backwards.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of magical.
Started the other way, and I have about half of what you have similar to that top part, up to about 28, 29, line 29. And then I just lost it. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't figure it out. So
there you go.
But it does make sense.
Yeah, and there's like, you're going to need, like, are all the questions showing up on the page at the same time? Like, there's still some more work to do with that. But, like, that's the solution. That's how I would approach that personally. Because, like, yeah, looking at that, just this, and all right, how do I get that in the format that I want? That's almost impossible if you don't know where you're going. And once you know where you're going, like, their smallest move you can take is to go one step backward from that. And then just keep going. And then every once in a while, you'll do that a couple times and go, oh, no. It's way easier to go forward from this point, because as these two things are closing in, now you might see a straight line from the beginning to the end. But like until you see that, just start working backwards. Questions about that approach?
Pretty good idea. I accidentally stumbled into that approach with the not the DOM calculator, but the email repeater. I was like, well, what do I want to do at the end? And then I worked backwards from there. So
bingo.
It really does work.
Yeah. And like, I'd say more broadly too, that there's a philosophy of adding features to software where you think of any feature that doesn't exist as a bug. You go, oh, I was supposed to see a bunch of questions on the page. So I have this weird bug where the questions don't show up, but you haven't actually written any code yet. But you start debugging it the same way that you would a regular bug. It was like, all right, how can I narrow this down as much as possible? All right, what if I hard-coded this stuff? Can I get it to show up on the page? And then you just treat all of that the exact same way you would debugging. And at the end of it, your features exists. Cool. Hope that's helpful.